In 1905, the Fox family was living near Gibson City, Illinois. They lived 7 miles north of town on road number 800. The main road to and from town ran alongside a set of railroad tracks. This is the way to the Foxes. Sachs had built a beautiful home that was the focal point for many social events. His children were growing up fast, and his family at home was getting smaller. George had moved to Iowa 3 years before. There he met Ella Claney. They were soon married but would never have children. Nellie had gone away to college. Walter was in his last year of high school and would soon be leaving for college. Nellie was very popular and had many friends. She and Walter were active in the church and were in the Temperance Union, early advocates of prohibition. Nellie visited her parents often. She and her friends would go shopping. It made the local news. Sachs took many business trips, often with his brother-in-law, William Trigger. He liked the Minnesota area. Farms were much bigger there. He would need help from the entire family. Sachs's little sister, Kate Chambers, lived about a mile away with her husband, Sam. The Chambers family was getting smaller, too. Elizabeth was married and lived in Iowa. Florabelle had gone to stay with her grandfather. Pearl was the only child at home. Pearl went to school with her cousin, Chester Fox. Sam Chambers was a successful farmer and had been elected as the local tax collector. He was well liked and described as a big jolly farmer. In December of 1904, Sam had a heart attack. He was unable to work his farm and needed to find something less strenuous. Sam was moving back to Radnor. He would stay at his father's house and work the dairy cows there. His daughter Florabelle was living there and could help take care of him. In March, Sachs hitched his horses to the wagon and helped Sam move to his new home. Sam took his horses too. Kate wrote a heartfelt thank you note for the going-away gifts they received. It was published in the local paper. Kate did not want to leave her sister-in-law, Mary Fox. Since they were young, they had vowed to raise their families together. They had kept their promise for the last 20 years, but now it may be finally coming to an end. She worried about losing her husband. Pearl was only 9 years old and needed her father. Katie was scared. Mary assured her that they had been through worse. Their families would be together soon. Kate knew that coming from Mary, this was not an empty promise. Like the fiasco in Kansas, as they called it, the girls would need to be patient. Sam, Kate, and Pearl moved back home to Radnor. They lived in a house that was next to Sam's father, John Chambers. It was on Fox Road. Kate's father, William Fox, sponsored the building of the road back in the 1850s. It connected the blacksmith shop to the railroad tracks. Sam and Kate's daughter, Florabelle, lived with her grandfather, less than a mile down this road. She had been courting the boy next door, Jim Carlisle. Granddad had known Jim for years. Jim worked his dairy farm as he went to school to become a mechanic. In 1906, Florabelle and Jim were married. Granddad loved Florabelle. For a wedding gift, he outdid himself. He gave them a car. It was a Ford Model N. With their new car, Jim and Florabelle could have lived wherever they wanted. Jim wanted to build a new house on the 20 acres his father gave him. Florabelle's Uncle Walter would help him build it. Florabelle wanted to stay with her grandfather and raise her family there. Jim was okay with Florabelle's decision. He liked Granddad, and Granddad liked being with his extended family. That family would soon get bigger. Florabelle was pregnant with her first child. Kate needed help. Sam's health was failing fast, and he was confined to the house. She wanted her oldest daughter, Elizabeth Giesenberg, to come home for a while. It may be the last time she gets to see her father. She visited her friend Mary. Elizabeth and her family could stay at Mary's house. They had plenty of room. Elizabeth had 2 children, and neither Kate nor Mary had seen either. Henry could get his old job back, working for Mary's brother, William Trigger. 8-year-old Grace was excited. The Giesenbergs arrived, and in April of 1907, Florabelle had her first child. It was a son they named Donald Carlisle. Kate often visited Mary and her daughter Elizabeth. Within a few months, Elizabeth told her mother she was pregnant. Kate, Mary, and Grace wanted her to stay there and have the baby. Her cousin George, Mary's oldest son, could watch over their farm in Iowa. They were neighbors. Elizabeth decided to stay for a while. In March of 1908, she had her third child. It was a son they named Lawrence. Kate and Sam had 4 grandchildren. Flora Belle often visited her sister Elizabeth and her Aunt Mary and Uncle Sax. She rode in the car with her husband Jim. One day in August, Flora Belle arrived with bad news. Her father, Sam's heart condition had worsened, and she expected he would not live much longer. Flora Belle was right. Sam died a week later, on August 17, 1908. All of the extended Fox families were together at Sam's funeral. Services were held at the Dickinson Cemetery. It is only a few hundred feet away from William Fox's old blacksmith shop and less than a mile from the Chambers home. The cemetery is named in honor of Griffith Dickinson. His oldest daughter, Nellie, is Walter Fox's wife and our great-great-aunt. Walter, Nellie, and 3 of their children are buried here. When Sam died, Sax and Mary had 3 children in college. Walter, Ray, and Nellie all attended Normal University, now called Illinois State. They only offered teaching degrees. The Fox children were to become teachers. Ray was a freshman, Nellie was a senior. The following year, Nellie graduated with her teaching degree. She returned to Gibson City and taught at the grade school there. She was a good teacher and was well liked by her students. In 1909, she taught the high room, which was the older kids. There was no middle school. Nellie's little sister Grace was one of Nellie's students. At the age of 11, she was the youngest child in the class, having skipped the first grade years earlier. At the end of the school year in 1909, teacher Nellie had a professional recommendation for Grace's parents, Sax and Mary. Grace was already familiar with all of the material she would be teaching in the high room. She had too many students to give Grace the time she needed to keep her challenged. Nellie had checked with the Gibson City High School. Grace was too young to enroll. Sax and Mary needed to do something before the next school term began in the fall. Walter and Ray were attending college at Normal University. Walter was a senior and would soon graduate, but Ray had 2 years to go. Ray did not want to be a teacher. He wanted to study industrial arts, but Normal University did not have a program. Ray was losing interest, and Sax was insisting he continue with his education. It was an issue. Mary had problems and needed her sisters, all of them. Kate and Ella soon arrived, and they brought along Nellie, Walter's wife. Christmas was coming soon, and Mary had some requests for Uncle Walter, the carpenter. Mary's twin sister Ella had 3 children. They were all teenagers and going to Dunlap High School. Her oldest, Charlotte, was 18 and soon to graduate. She wanted Charlotte to attend Bradley Polytech University in Peoria. Nellie also wanted her 17-year-old daughter Ann Rooston to attend Bradley. Bradley was and still is one of the finest technical schools in Illinois, maybe the entire country. But in 1910, Bradley had no dormitories for the students to live in. 18-year-old Charlotte would need to stay with someone while she went to school. And Ella said Bradley had an industrial arts program with all the latest technology. Kate wanted her 17-year-old daughter Pearl to go to college with Mary's children. She and Mary lived 70 miles apart, and neither one of them liked it. The cousins were not growing up together like they had promised years ago. Flora Belle was pregnant again, and they would soon need Aunt Mary. Sax and Mary should move to Peoria. Ray could study industrial arts at Bradley. It wasn't a 4-year degree, but he would be doing what he enjoyed. Peoria had some of the best schools in the country, and Sax knew it. Chester could go to Peoria High School. Grace could leave the high room and attend a junior high school. There were libraries, lecture halls, and theaters. Mary would have a gas stove, hot water, a telephone, and electricity. Mary and Kate would be less than 8 miles apart. With a car, they were only an hour away. Ella's daughter Charlotte could go to Bradley and stay with Sax and Mary. Her father would pay for everything. Walter and Nellie's daughter, Ann Rooston, could go too. The girls needed a plan, and soon they had one. They really outdid themselves on this one. Kate would help. Kate's son-in-law, Jim Carlisle, would help Sax buy a car and keep it running. Sax could check on his farm in Gibson City every day if he wanted. Kate's daughter, Elizabeth, and her husband, Henry, could stay in Sax's house and keep everything repaired. He trusted Henry. But Sax would need to be convinced. He had discussed this many times with Mary. Sax would not leave his home to someone he didn't trust. Taking the railroad back and forth to Gibson City to work the farm was too expensive. He also had to manage his 80-acre farm back in Radnor. It was being rented out. Walter managed everything, but the tenants were not keeping it up as they should. How could he manage 2 farms while living in the city? Mary got Uncle Walter to help. Walter had a solution he knew would meet Sax's approval. But first he wanted to discuss his nephew Ray. Walter reminded Sax that Ray had a special talent, and it would be a shame to waste it. Not everyone wants to be a teacher, he told his little brother. Christmas arrived quickly in 1909, just as it does today. All of the Fox families came to Sax and Mary's to open their gifts. Uncle Walter arrived with a wagon load of things all covered up. 16-year-old Chester had his gifts opened first. He got a shotgun and a Brownie camera. Against Mary's better judgment, Sax gave him a cue stick. Chester liked to play pool. Uncle Walter made him a tackle box and a gun rack. Grace got her very own teacher's desk and a desk for her students. Big brother Ray designed it to look just like the one at Grace's school. Uncle Walter used Ray's plan to build it. She got a real blackboard, chalk, and something brand new, crayons. And her father gave her something she had never seen before. He picked it up on a business trip through Chicago. It was a set of marionettes, Pinocchio and Friends. Grace loved them. Big brother Ray built her a puppet stage. It had many different sets with scenery and furniture, and it was all hand-painted. Grace was soon giving puppet shows for all the family to see. Grace loved to read, so Aunt Kate got her a book. It went with her play set. It was just like the book she had finished reading. Chester took pictures of the different sets and the puppet shows. Grace cherished these pictures and would keep them with her forever. Ray got only 2 gifts that year. One was out in Uncle Walter's wagon. Sax and Mary watched Ray as he opened his other gift. It was a set of professional drafting tools. Uncle Walter bought in his gift, a drafting table. At first, Ray was confused, but the look on his mother's face betrayed her surprise. Ray would be going to Bradley. The Fox family was moving to Peoria. But that wasn't the only life-changing gift that year. Walter's 19-year-old son, Norvin Saxelby, was there. Norvin was single and had no plans to marry or attend college. He was a farmer, just like his Uncle Sax. Walter and Sax both presented Norvin with his gift. It was a 2-year prepaid lease for an 80-acre farm. Reading on, the property description was beginning to sound familiar. It was his Uncle Sax's farm. Norvin could live there and work the farm for 2 years while he saved his money. Then, when he was 21, he could afford to buy the property outright if he still wanted to be a farmer. Sax and Mary planted many seeds that Christmas Day in 1909. Norvin's life would be forever changed. 4 of Mary's nieces, Charlotte, Helen, Pearl, and Ann Rooston, would all attend college. Chester would be attending one of the best high schools in the country. What they started with Ray and Grace would continue to grow. Their puppet shows would eventually entertain children all over the world. Mary and Kate prepared a delicious Christmas dinner. They were experts. Ella and Nellie helped along with all the cousins. After dinner, all the Fox girls gathered together to talk. Floribel had a new neighbor, her cousin Norvin. And Norvin, according to Kate, needed a wife.